Welcome to episode 1 of the Momentum podcast. Lena and I are so glad that you are joining us today. We are diving in and hitting on one of the most common issues faced by women in business today, imposter syndrome. You know that feeling when you're working hard, you're achieving big things, everybody seems to believe in you, but deep down, you're convinced that it's a matter of time before they figure out that you are not as good as they think. Maybe you just got lucky, or you're just not really that qualified to be where you are. That's imposter syndrome. It's the sneaky belief that no matter how much you accomplish, you're not as capable or deserving as others think, even when all evidence proves otherwise.
Exactly. It's that inner voice that questions if you belong, even when you're crushing it. Okay, fine. Maybe not by your high standards, but most certainly by the society standards. So the imposter syndrome can show up whether you're stepping into a new role, starting a business, or even scaling what's already working. And let's be real, it's something so many of us face, and no matter how accomplished we are.
Yeah. As I was prepping for this episode, I did some research on how pervasive imposter syndrome is. There are a couple of studies out, and I wanted to share some of these statistics just to see if they resonate with you. There was a study done of 4,000 adults where 53% of the women experienced imposter syndrome compared to 54% of men who never reported feeling it at all. Now, I don't know about you, but that kind of ticks me off because it is so pervasive with women. Another study actually done by KPMG revealed that 75% of female executives across various industries have all experienced imposter syndrome during their careers. I'm counted in one of that. I wasn't in that study, but that is me, right? The impact on our mental health of imposter syndrome is real. There's increased levels of anxiety, depression, and that adversely affects our overall well-being and job performance and how we show up every day.
So let's talk for a second about how imposter syndrome manifests, no pun intended, in various ways. Because here's the thing, it often adapts to different contexts. It can literally camouflage itself and be a little chameleon. And for example, it can appear as perfectionism, setting impossibly high standards and then feeling crushed by even the minor, tiny setback or mistake. Or it could be discounting your own success. How many times we attribute achievements to luck or timing or external factors rather than our own abilities. Then, of course, the fear of exposure, constantly fearing that others will discover you, quote unquote, don't belong or aren't truly competent. A second cousin twice removed is overworking, of course, going to those extreme lengths to prove your worth and justify your position, pulling in those all-nighters and burning midnight oil as a badge of honor. And then my favorite, because it's relatable, procrastination, you guys. And that is all about actually avoiding things out of fear of failure or being exposed for not knowing enough. So it's kind of like if you don't do anything, you cannot be quote unquote discovered. So I don't know, Molly, does this resonate with you? Do you have a story in your professional life when you were like, yep, here's me feeling the imposter?
I actually have a couple of them, but some of the most recent ones were from this last role that I took. So about 4.5 years ago, I took an executive position in a smaller company in a different industry. I was the only female executive, and all of my peers were very well schooled, highly credentialed men with experience in our industry. So immediately I feel a little bit on the back foot because I don't play in the same arenas that they've played. I have experience in a completely different industry. And part of that is that experience is why I was hired. But I'll tell you, it did not take long for the imposter syndrome to set in, right? I did feel out of place. I wasn't following the same, news websites that they were, and they would talk about things going on in the market. And that was not an area that I was very well versed in. And I felt out of place. I felt unqualified. And the way it kind of manifested was really fueling my perfectionistic tendencies. So I really leaned in. Now, at the time, I did not have healthy coping mechanisms, and I didn't have some of the strategies that we're going to talk about today in place. What about you, Lena? How has imposter syndrome showed up for you?
Oh, the big one for me was when I started the transition from the corporate world into running my own business. Because I was in corporate for over 25 years. So it felt known. Like I had the mold, I fit the mold. I basically grew up there from a pup. And then all of a sudden, I was stepping into the world of unknown. And I think what was truly testing me was the fact that I'm a coach. So I work with other people and their issues and their challenges and their aspirations and goals and problems. And all these people come in different, shapes and forms and bring different histories with them. And so I have to be honest with you that for a while, every time when my client did something amazing, they progressed, they broke through a limiting belief, they shifted something, they doubled their income. I was like, amazing. They're just an amazing client. And I'm so grateful and blessed to have them. Totally discounting the success and not thinking that it was anything related to the work that I was doing with them. And then, of course, overworking like weekends. What weekends? I was burning the midnight oil through all hours of the day and of the week. So I probably tapped into just about all of them until I learned how to take a step back. As always, start with an awareness and just say, okay, what am I experiencing? Why does it feel yucky, sticky, and like I'm running through molasses? And then what can I do about changing that? Because honestly, that type of thinking, those thoughts and beliefs really do not serve us. So like I coined it an itty bitty shitty committee because it kind of like gets together in your head
Oh,
and
yeah.
starts running your day. And then you're at the mercy of those imaginary quote unquote mean girls.
I can relate to that. I love the itty bitty shitty committee. They need to be dismissed,
Oh my
right?
God.
Okay, so what are some of the strategies that
Yeah.
we can use when we find ourselves in, under the weight of imposter syndrome?
So I'll talk about a couple that were helpful for me. And not to say that these are the only ones, but I found them to be simple, practical, and something that I can do on my own, which I always love. So the first thing that I do, and it works for the imposter syndrome, or quite frankly, any limiting belief or any thought that doesn't serve me, is I take a step back and I truly ask myself, is this a reality? Is this actually what's happening? Is it a hardcore written in stone fact? Or could it be my perception? Because often the beliefs driving the imposter syndrome actually come from that. So think of it this way: external criticism is such a huge thing that conditions us to be fearful of kind of the external feedback or that validation, because usually we grow up in a critical environment that can truly put that self-doubt in our mind, and it really makes us question our abilities. Like
Yeah.
the very first test you sit down for, like when kindergarten, all of a sudden, if you scored 5 stars and your friend scored 7 stars, well, she seems to be 2 stars ahead of you, loser, right? That's when it starts.
Yes. Yes. It does start young. It does start young.
And then what do? We internalize that, right? So we start absorbing those societal or even like family expectations that truly make us feel like we must overachieve to be worthy, and how hard that is, right?
Yes.
So what I normally would do, and that's actually something I even teach my teenagers now, is ask yourself two questions. Is this belief grounded in a fact? Or is it a story I've been just telling myself? And then, am I evaluating my abilities objectively? Or could it be that I am playing small and minimizing my area of genius and my strength? So
I
that's
think,
kind of question number one.
yeah, I think that that's really important, especially around, is it perception or is it reality? Because I found in my life that there are so many stories and narratives that have been kind of baked into my mindset that I draw upon from past experience of things, situations that I've had, and I have attached a meaning to it that actually isn't true. It actually is a story or a perception from that experience. And having to unwind that is a really important skill, and I think is really useful when you think about imposter syndrome and how to release the grip of it.
That is such a brilliant point that you made, because what I usually talk about again with my clients is that there is no such thing as reality. Everything is basically our perception. It's an illusion. And with that, there isn't anything like successful, unsuccessful, good, bad, mistake, or experience. It's truly the color that we use to kind of put it, be in those lines, right? Like color within the lines. So what you said really resonated with me, is like, is this truly the experience, or am I just coloring it a certain way? And sometimes words play a huge part in it, right? Because we can call it
Absolutely.
a mistake or we can call it an experience. It could be a
Yes.
struggle or it could be a journey, right? Like they all have their own energetic weight that comes with it.
Yeah.
So words are very important. And that actually leads us to a second technique that you use to help you reframe the imposter syndrome. And that is reframing the thought. Because imposter syndrome truly thrives on the negative self-talk. And to disrupt it, what we do is we replace words that are demeaning, hurtful, condescending with the words that truly lift us up and help us see things in a different perspective. So, for example, when we feel like, oh, I don't belong here, what if you thought about it from a standpoint of, I've earned my place through hard work and dedication to be at this table? Or downplaying your success and saying, well, I just got lucky. Like I got this promotion because I'm just lucky. I got lucky. What if you actually reframed it to say, my preparation and effort led to this success?
That's really powerful. For the record, I don't believe in luck. I don't think that's a thing, right? So even when I think about, my initial feeling of imposter syndrome when I took that new role, I can look back now and say, I know exactly what led me to get that role. Now, once I got there, I had some more work to do to reframe how I was showing up in light of the new environment that I was in. Okay, so third strategy to release the grip of imposter syndrome is to identify if there is a signal of misalignment. So, imposter syndrome can also signal misalignment with your natural genius, your skill set, your talents, right? When operating outside of this zone, it's easy to feel insecure. it's easy to feel insecure, especially also if it's something new. So being able to determine, is there misalignment or are you just doing something new? Because we've all been in that place where we're doing something new and we need time to get in there and roll up our sleeves and figure it out. But there can be some imposter syndrome related to being misaligned. I've actually had this experience throughout much of 2022 and 2023. The role in my company actually evolved to include some responsibilities outside my skill set. And if you've ever worked for a small company, you know that you wear many hats, and sometimes those hats don't fit great, and that's okay. But what I found myself experiencing was imposter syndrome again, because it took me a while to figure out that what I was doing, how my role had evolved was actually misaligned to my skill set. And so that imposter syndrome kept coming up. And I kept thinking, okay, they're going to know that I don't know what I'm doing, that I'm not qualified to do this work. And so when I realized that, hey, there's a misalignment here, I actually had to call it what it was and make it and have it shift truly my role. Now, if this sounds like where you are, you can use this signal as an opportunity to identify where you excel effortlessly, right? Getting clarity here is a great first step. Then, if you can, delegate those tasks that drain you or are outside your strengths. And if needed, shift your role so that you do feel like you're more aligned and in a place where you're adding value and not under this weight of imposter syndrome due to misalignment. See, imposter syndrome doesn't have to hold you back. By recognizing how it shows up, determining if it's being fueled by perception or reality, reframing your limiting beliefs, and resolving any misalignment, you can confidently navigate the business that you're in, knowing with full confidence that you are capable and deserve every success that you achieve. Hey, if this conversation today resonated with you, we would love to hear from you. Feel free to drop us a line at contact@momentumpodcast.live.